Hello, everybody. How are you doing this fine Saturday, 11:11 a.m. right now? Make a wish at the time of the recording. Anyway, I don't know when I'm going to post it, but I did want to catch y'all up on the Blake Lively Justin Baldoni lawsuit. I mean, filings are flying to and fro, but one of the most recent filings was Blake Lively has responded to Jed Wallace's motion to dismiss. Now, Jed Wallace is just one of the many players in this game. Now, if you remember, Jed Wallace filed a motion to dismiss. He's one of the people that Blake Lively has sued, and he has filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit. And then in the alternative, if the judge didn't want to dismiss the lawsuit, he's trying to get it transferred over there to Texas. Now, a big part of Jed Wallace's arguments is that he was the first one to file a lawsuit, and there's this whole first to file doctrine, which pretty much encourages a court to allow the venue, which is like where the court case is going to be held, the venue to be in the jurisdiction where the lawsuit was filed first. Now, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and them side have said, we were the first ones to file. Jed Wallace dismissed the first lawsuit that was filed anyway. And then Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and their side had also said that Jed Wallace's own lawyer had conceded some things. And some of the things that this lawyer had allegedly conceded, according to Blake Lively, is that, yeah, this case needs to be all heard together under one roof. Now, Blake Lively said that Jed Wallace's lawyer was Brian Friedman. He had made certain statements in a certain court. And when he made these statements in court, Brian Friedman, on the behalf of Jed Wallace, then Brian Friedman was admitting, yes, we do not need to be litigating this thing all over the country. We need to all have it all under one roof. Okay. Well, Jed Wallace had popped back, had lashed back and said, that is false. That is a false statement. Brian Friedman is not my attorney. The only counsel of record I've ever had was this one guy over here, Charles, whoever, it's Oprah's lawyer and all this. And so I was kind of like, oh my God, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and them, they're in trouble because they lying about this man, Jed Wallace. Well, Blake Lively and them have now clapped back and they're saying, no, we weren't lying. And here's the receipts. So let me pull up the document. This is docket 161. And as you can see, it says memorandum of law in opposition to Jed Wallace and Street Relations motion to dismiss. So Jed Wallace had filed a motion to dismiss, and now here is an opposition to it filed by Blake Lively. Jed Wallace is an integral part of the conspiracy. He sues in California, dismisses that action. Then he sued in Texas after learning that the action would proceed in New York. The venue arguments are meritless. This court definitely has jurisdiction. His motion to transfer to Texas should be denied, and his motion to dismiss the lawsuit should be denied. Blake says Jed Wallace and his company, Street Relations, Inc., and together with Mr. Wallace, that's the Wallace parties. I'm just for the purposes of reading this, I'm going to call it Jed Wallace, but be aware that the Wallace parties just means him and his company, Street Relations, Inc. They were the, quote, covert operatives in Justin Baldoni and them's conspiracy to retaliate against Blake Lively for speaking out about Mr. Baldoni. Mr. Wallace is a self-described hired who executes untraceable campaigns on social media platforms. A self-described hired pew who executes, quote, untraceable campaigns on social media platforms. In this case, despite Jed Wallace's boasts about his clandestine abilities, he and his company got caught, even without discovery. The facts available to Ms. Lively already show that Mr. Wallace and Street Relations joined and actively participated in the conspiracy to, quote, bury Blake Lively and destroy her reputation. In the text messages and the emails, including with Jed, these confirm Jed knowingly joined a conspiracy designed to harm Miss Lively. He knew what the conspiracy was trying to accomplish, and he helped it happen. The other co-conspirators could barely contain their glee at how successfully the Wallace parties executed the plan, patting themselves on the back about their amazing work. Defendants Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel celebrated the conspiracy's, quote, total success in achieving a shift on social due largely to Jed and his team's efforts to shift the narrative towards shining a spotlight on Blake and Ryan instead of Mr. Baldoni's conduct. The Wallace party's efforts were so successful that Ms. Nathan commented that the majority of socials are so pro-Justin, I don't even agree with them. Haha, LOL. She also added, quote, it's actually sad. It just shows you have people really want to hate on women. When another woman came forward to describe similar misconduct she experienced at the hands of Mr. Baldoni, the, quote, co-conspirators turned to Jed Wallace. with Miss Abel reporting that, quote, "We've flagged to Jed and his team for more serious action on the social side." So Blake Lively says, to be clear, the Wallace parties, Jed Wallace, don't even try to act like there was no conspiracy, just only that he didn't join it. In support of that contention, Jed Wallace relies exclusively on a self-serving declaration filed by Jed Wallace himself. It asserts in a conclusory fashion that he did not join the conspiracy. But the self-serving declaration is contradicted by the verbatim text messages and emails in the amended complaint. At this stage, the amended complaint is more than plausible, and the allegations within it are more than plausible. And so for that reason, it trumps Mr. Wallace's declaration. So what they're saying is Jed Wallace is trying to get out of this lawsuit. He's trying to get out of liability based on nothing more than his own little, "oh yeah, I didn't do that," and signing his name. Blake Lively and them are saying that's not enough. What do you mean? Well, I said he did, he said he didn't, so we got to go to discovery. On top of that, the challenge of venue is just so stupid because everybody else in this whole entire case has already decided and consented to the Southern District of New York to have jurisdiction. And then we get to that first filed action part where Jed Wallace is saying that he should have his venue respected because his claims against Blake Lively are different than everybody else's claims, and he was the, quote, first to file. Also, he has a totally different lawyer. He has his own lawyer. Remember that? And remember, I thought that was like pretty compelling. I thought he actually had pretty strong argument because it's like he never really was represented by Brian. He obviously has seemingly kept his distance from being represented by Brian Friedman, et cetera, et cetera. And I have pontificated on why that might be. I mean, I can only speculate because I don't know. But look at this right here. It says, Jed, no, buddy, this is the first filed action, not that thing what you talking about. You can't attempt to force Blake Lively and everybody else to go over there and litigate an exactly the same type of action in a totally another state. It gets in a little bit to some of the things that Jed was allegedly, supposedly accused of doing, which is, quote, creation of social fan engagement to go back and forth with any negative accounts, helping to change the narrative, stay on track. All of this will be most importantly, quote, untraceable. Also, it proposed strategies to, quote, advance misleading counter narratives, including pushing Miss Nathan's narrative that Blake Lively had a less than favorable reputation, proposing planting stories about certain things, and blaming Blake Lively for people quitting and getting fired. Mr. Baldoni wants to feel like Blake can be buried. We could get in a lot of trouble if we actually wrote down what we can do. We can't write that we will destroy her. Imagine if a document saying all the things that Baldoni wants ends up in the wrong hands. You know, we can bury anyone, but I can't write that to him. The whole purpose of Jed Wallace joining was to, quote, shape public perception of his clients and their adversaries, flooding the zone with their manufactured narratives. This hired with a, quote, proprietary formula for defining artists and trends, specializes in executing these untraceable campaigns on social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, and X to shape public perception. So even if you don't really like Blake Lively, even if you could give less about her, just stop for 1 second and think about the fact that this is someone's job. Even if it's not Jed Wallace's job, if someone has this job, probably many someones have a job like this, to shape public perception. But what does that actually mean? To manipulate us, to lie to us, to lead us into thinking certain things about certain people. I personally have been a victim of this type of campaign. Now, was it Jed Wallace behind it? I don't know. Probably not. Who knows? Could be. Who knows? But someone did. Someone loaned someone $100,000 to sue me. Why? They lost. They lost the lawsuit over and over and over again because in the United States of America, I don't know, somebody didn't tell them now. I guess they learned there's free speech. Yes, there is free speech. And especially whenever it's an issue of public concern, especially whenever it's someone trying to mislead the public by lying about how someone died under their care. But someone loaned that person $100,000 to sue me. Why? Why? Why was there an entire mainstream media documentary made full of defamatory, false statements about me? Why did they bring on an entire carnival worth of people to pretend like they were that surprise army? It's to shape public perception about me. It did not work and it will never. It did not work and it will never. But now, a year ago, 2 years ago, if I would have said this, at least 50% of people probably would have thought I was crazy. But I am not crazy. I was not then and I am not now. I know exactly what I am looking at when I am looking at it. And it was someone whose job it is to do this, to create social media accounts, to do nothing but tweet all day about me. Defamatory, harmful, harassing information, tweeting what I was wearing, at a court hearing before I ever tweeted what I was wearing, before I ever posted a single picture of what I was wearing. So yeah, I'm a victim of this type of stuff. When I'm talking about this type of stuff, it's not that I'm like, oh, poor Blake Lively. She's the victim she claims she is. She could be a liar, okay? Could be a liar, ain't what I'm saying. What I am saying is, why are we okay? Why is it even freaking legal? Why is it even legal for this to be somebody's job? To trick us, to create fake accounts, to create fake narratives, aka lies, to perpetuate lies. There's no law against it. But why is this legal? Why is this someone's job? What type of person even wants this to be their job? Now, again, I'm not saying this is Jed Wallace's job. I don't know. Okay. I don't know. One of the ways that Street Relations serves his clients is by subcontracting with other firms. So Jed hires these subcontractors to do untraceable assignments as part of an offensive, quote, social combat strategy. Jed Wallace also has a close relationship with Brian Friedman, who is Justin Baldoni's lawyer, and he works very closely with him. Now, the allegation that Blake Lively is making is that Jed Wallace and Street Relations got to work seeding, manipulating, and advancing disparaging content on social media platforms and internet chat forums, including specific platforms that Miss Abel and Mr. Baldoni would focus on: Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram. Miss Abel emailed Miss Nathan and Mr. Wallace August 8th, saying to Melissa Nathan and her tag team about Mr. Wallace and the Street Relations team, quote, "Is this something you can bring them up to speed on so they can hit the ground running?" Miss Abel circulated a screenshot of a post by another woman accusing Mr. Baldoni of additional misconduct and announced that she had directed Mr. Wallace to take action to suppress it, stating, quote, "I'm assuming this is not true in the slightest. Either way, we've flagged to Jed and his team for more serious action on the social side." The same day, Melissa Nathan reported to the group Jed Wallace's sentiment that, quote, "We are crushing it" on Reddit. Around the same time, threads did begin to appear on Reddit, speculating about a feud between Miss Lively and Mr. Baldoni, calculated to paint Blake in the wrong. On August 10th, the tag team expressly acknowledged the success of Jed Wallace, due largely to Jed and his team's efforts. He led a digital team that worked with Miss Nathan, Miss Abel, the tag team, to further implement their social manipulation strategy. "Let us chat to Jed on this." Miss Nathan reassured him that it was something much more sophisticated, stating that the, quote, "other team," a reference to the Wallace parties, "is doing something very specific in terms of what they do." The Wayfarer parties, then they start reminding us, the Wayfarer parties, including Mr. Wallace, sued the New York Times for defamation in California state court. So that happened New Year's Eve. Wayfarer, Justin Baldoni, and them sued the New York Times in California. Now, this all arose out of an article the New York Times wrote, the "We Can Bury Anyone" article. 2 weeks later, the Wayfarer parties, but not Mr. Wallace. Okay, look at this. Jed Wallace actually did sue the New York Times alongside the rest of the plaintiffs. But then they dropped that case and then they refiled it in a different court. When they refiled it in a different court, Jed Wallace didn't join. And it probably was out of a strategy, to try and separate himself from this case, from them, so he could have his Texas day in court. But from what Blake Lively argues in this opposition to his motion to dismiss, I don't see how Jed Wallace is possibly going to win, because when I first read Jed Wallace's motion to dismiss, I thought maybe he could get his case dismissed, especially because he was relying on basically calling Blake Lively a liar. He basically was like, "They said my lawyer said certain things that was just not true. My lawyer never said that stuff in Texas. This is my lawyer filing this thing right now. And this is the first thing he's ever put in. He's never said the things that." So I'm like, dang, Jed Wallace might be able to win on this. But now that I've read this filing right here, I don't think so. I don't think Jed Wallace is going to be able to be dismissed from this case. I don't think he's going to be able to transfer a venue. I think he's stuck right there. And it's because of this set of paragraphs that makes me think that. Again, New Year's Eve, They sue New York Times, including Mr. Wallace. This is under Brian Friedman. Then on January 16th, 2 weeks later, the Wayfarer parties, everybody else, same people except Jed Wallace, they sued Blake Lively and others in this court, and then they dismissed their California state case. So the one with Jed Wallace on it did get dismissed. At the February 3rd initial conference on this matter, Brian Friedman, who had represented the Wallace parties in connection with their California lawsuit, so again, he had in fact represented Jed Wallace when he sued New York Times New Year's Eve. So Brian Friedman, who was Jed Wallace's lawyer, at least all the way up to January 16th, he represented Jed Wallace. He explained in the initial conference on the matter that the Wayfarer parties had filed in this court, quote, because it made no sense to be doing this on different coasts and with different courts. And since so many of the issues are going to be so similar, to have it all in one proceeding in front of this court would make the most sense. Now, Jed Wallace previously argued that Brian Friedman was not his lawyer, but if you look at this, yes, he was. He was his lawyer at least for 2 weeks from New Year's Eve to January 16th, 2025. And at the pretrial conference on the matter, Brian Friedman said, we need to have this all up under one roof. We don't need to be having court case in California, court case in Texas, court case over there in New York. We need to have it all under one because so much stuff's going to line up to be the same stuff. It's going to be confusing, waste of money, inefficient, etc. Now here's Jed Wallace saying exactly the opposite. The very next day, Jed Wallace sued Blake Lively in Texas, asserting a cause of action for declaratory judgment and all this stuff rising up out of that CRD complaint. But the CRD complaint was intimately and intricately connected to the New York Times article. So this is all kind of a common locus, a common set of facts that all of this is arising up from. And the only evidence that Jed Wallace even tries to provide that he isn't a part of this is his own little self-serving declaration. He just said, oh no, I had nothing to do with this. Jed Wallace let me out of it. And there also is a whole entire other side plot about Jed Wallace where he had actually changed the status and the designation of his California business. See, Street Relations Inc. has pretty much always been operating in California pretty much since very early on. It's always operated in California. Now, it did open a branch. It did open a Street Relations Inc. or whatever in Texas at some point, but it wasn't until he was suing Blake Lively that he did change the designation of his California operations to kind of inactive or whatever. It's no longer the same status. And it appears that it was a strategy to try and keep him from being pulled into this whole lawsuit. I mean, really, it does seem like his whole entire career really depends on being kind of secret, clandestine, whatever you want to call it. And it does seem like he really did get busted here. Again, don't forget, this is the same guy that was in charge of Bam Margera's wellness contract, meaning Bam said he had to talk to this guy every day on the phone to make sure he was taking his medicine. What? What is this PR hired gun having to do with watching Bam take his medicine? That don't make no sense to me. He was filing stuff even in the court case. And then Jed Wallace did work for Paramount. He was kind of contracted by Paramount to administer this wellness agreement. But what does that have to do with PR and media? Should the person who's in charge of somebody's wellness agreement and making sure that they're compliant with taking their medicine be the same person in charge of PR? I mean, these are questions I have. I just wanted to make sure that y'all knew about this. That was docket number 161. That's all I really had for today. In the meantime, facts ain't defamation and neither are opinions. Girl, love you, mean, okay, bye.